Big news! Boost Mobile is now sending experts nationwide to deliver and set up customers' new phones at home or work.
Wait, we're going on tour?
Not a tour. We're delivering and setting up customers' phones so it's easier to upgrade.
Let's get in the tour bus and hit the road.
No, not a tour bus. It's a regular car we use to deliver and set up customers' phones at home or work.
Are you a groupie on this tour?
We deliver and set up phones. It's not a tour.
Oh, you're definitely a groupie.
Introducing Store to Door. Switch and get a new device with expert setup and delivery wherever you're at.
Delivery available for select devices purchased at boostmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by Paranormal Playback, a new podcast where hosts Shar, Mel and Laura recap the spooky and entertaining world of paranormal reality TV. Each week they take a fresh look at popular shows like Ghost Adventures and Kindred Spirits, blending humour with insight as they pull apart what's happening on screen. The three of them are a mix of believers and skeptics, which makes for really fun conversations, sometimes leaning into mystery, other times asking the questions viewers might be thinking themselves. With their background in creative production, they know how these shows are put together, so they're great at pointing out the moments that feel real versus the ones that might be more for the cameras. And their segment, This Old Haunt, digs into the true crime side of paranormal investigations, separating fact from fiction. With Halloween coming up, it's the perfect time to add something spooky, funny and a little addictive to your playlist. For even more spooky, ghostly, paranormal content with a humorous spin, go check out Paranormal Playback. Hello listeners and welcome back to another episode of Scary. I'm your host Will, and each week I narrate your real life paranormal experiences as well as some famous paranormal cases dotted in throughout as we go along. I'm hoping this episode sounds a little bit better. I increased my knowledge in sound production since our last episode, so hopefully this is a little bit better. If not, I don't know what to say to you. I'm doing all of this on my own, so please go easy on me. Before we get into this week's episode, we need to say a special thank you to our new Patreon subscribers, who are Ruth Kessman, Mark Nielsen, Simone Corleone, David Gracie, Sandra, Sarah and Becky. Thank you so much for signing up to the show's Patreon. If this is something that you're interested in, you can find the link in this episode's show notes, or you can go to patreon.com/scaryaparanormalpodcast. I have 2 listener experiences for you this week, so let's get into our first encounter. I was on my way home from work. It was a Thursday night, later than I usually finished. I worked in security at a shopping centre, mostly watching CCTV and dealing with the odd shoplifter. The shifts were long. That particular night, one of the other guards had called in sick, so I had to stay a bit longer than I usually would to cover. And by the time I clocked out, it was just past midnight. I was pretty tired, I remember, and the last thing I wanted to do was wait around for a bus. The bus stop wasn't one I usually used. My normal route had stopped running by the time I had clocked off work, so I had to take a different bus from a quieter street that was a little bit further away. I didn't love the area. Half of the shops were shut down, and the only places still open were a takeaway and an off license. It wasn't dodgy exactly, just a bit dead. When I got to the stop, there was nobody else there. I remember checking the timetable on my phone. The next bus was in 10 minutes. And I decided to spend that time scrolling aimlessly on my phone. When I eventually looked up, I noticed that there was a man standing at the far end of the bus stop, just a little bit outside the glow of the streetlights. I hadn't seen him when I walked up. I hadn't heard him either. He was just there. He was dressed pretty normal. Jeans, dark jacket. Could have been in maybe his 40s or a little bit older. It was kind of hard to tell. Something about this guy felt a little bit off. Not in an obvious way. He wasn't drunk or acting strange. He was very rigid, still. Most people waiting for a bus are doing something. They're checking their phone. They shift from foot to foot, look up and down the street. But this guy was just standing there, hands in his pockets, staring straight ahead. I really didn't think much of it, other than the fact that he was a little bit off. He was just another late night commuter, the same as me. A few moments passed, and out of nowhere he said, "You look tired." I glanced over at him, and he was looking right at me now. His voice was very casual, like as if we'd been chatting already, like he knew me. I just gave a small shrug and said, "Yeah, pretty long shift today." And he nodded like that made sense. And then said, "Still heading home?" It's a weird thing to say, right? Something about the way he said it made me freeze a bit. I hadn't mentioned about going home. I'm sure you could put two and two together and think if somebody was out this late and getting a bus, they were probably heading home. But I hadn't said anything about where I was going. I remember just letting out a little laugh, trying not to sound too weirded out, and said, "Yeah, something like that." And he just smiled. Wasn't a threatening smile. It was more like he was enjoying something I wasn't in on. I kind of shifted and glanced at my phone again. The bus was now 4 minutes away. And then the stop's digital display flickered and said delayed. Brilliant. Trying to shake the feeling, I cleared my throat and said, "Hey, you've been waiting long?" And he tilted his head slightly just to make me notice, and then said, "Not as long as you." I deliberately had asked him this because I wasn't sure if I had missed him before I had gotten to the bus stop. Had he been there beforehand, or? But he was confirming that he saw that I was there before him. Before I could respond to him, he added, "You always take this bus home, don't you?" And my stomach dropped a little bit at that point, because this wasn't my usual bus. This wasn't even my usual route. I should have ignored him. I should have kept my mouth shut, looked at my phone and waited for the bus like normal. But something about the way he said, "You always take this bus home, don't you?" It kind of rubbed me the wrong way. So I said back to him, "I don't actually." And he smiled again like he already knew that, and said, "No, you don't." At that point, my stomach was twisted in knots. This wasn't just a weird guy making conversation. He knew something about me, or at least he wanted me to think that he did. I looked at my phone again. It said bus in 2 minutes. I remember shifting my body slightly, angling it away so I wasn't fully facing him anymore. But he didn't move. He didn't check the road for the bus. He didn't even glance at my phone. He just stood there watching me. Eventually, a set of headlights swung around the corner. For the first time since he'd spoken to me, I felt a wave of relief. I stepped forward as the bus slowed to a stop and gave the usual little half nod to the driver as the doors opened. Inside, the bus was mostly empty, just a few late night commuters spread across the seats. I climbed on, tapped my card, and I remember heading towards the middle of the bus. As I sat down, I expected to see the man following behind me, but I didn't. I glanced up towards the front. The bus doors were still open. The driver was still waiting, and that man hadn't moved. He was standing at the bus stop, still staring right at me, still smiling, like he'd known all along that I'd get on first or something, I don't know. The driver gave a small cough, and then he looked at me through the mirror and said, "Is he getting on?" And I turned my head to look at the man at the bus stop, and he was gone. The stop was completely empty. There was nowhere for this man to go. The street was long and open. If he'd walked away, you'd have seen him. I had took my eyes off him for literally a second. I remember the driver looking in his mirrors and then peering his head out because he could see that this guy was gone as well. And then he shouted back, "Where did he go?" And he just kind of sighed and shut the doors and took off. I remember exhaling kind of slowly to shake this tension away. I didn't know if this guy was a bit dangerous. It was fine. He was just some guy messing with me, right? Probably having a laugh at my expense. Weird people do exist. That was all, right? The bus rumbled forward and I looked out the window, watching that bus stop kind of fade from distance. As we drove on a bit, we turned a corner, and there under a streetlight was this man smiling. I kind of told myself that I was imagining things. I was tired. That's what I wanted to believe anyway. This man had disappeared from the bus stop without a sound, and then somehow he was ahead of the bus, standing under a streetlight, smiling, like he'd been there all along. It didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. I remember just turning my head away from the window. It was a long shift. It was a late night. Your mind has to be playing tricks on you. This has to be the explanation. The bus kind of trotted along through these really quiet streets. It was late. the passengers that were on board were getting less and less. There was a couple of students in the back that were chatting, and there was an older man staring out the window, and a woman that was in front of me on her phone. The bus then turned onto this darker stretch of road, one of those kind of long residential streets that had no street lights, just rows of houses with dim kind of porch lamps. Outside there was not much to see except for darkness, and when that happens inside, the windows turn into mirrors. I just want to say that nothing like this had ever happened to me before and has never happened to me since. When I looked up and out towards the window, you could see a faint reflection of all the other passengers on the bus. And then I saw him sitting about 2 rows behind me. My heart literally nearly came out of my chest. I turned around so fast to look back, and the seat was empty. There was no one there. In the reflection, it was the same guy, the same dark jacket, that same really still posture. Even though it happened in a matter of seconds, I can still see him in my mind, in the reflection, sitting on the bus. After this happened, it just made me stand up and hold on to a bar on the bus and just look out the window to see when my next stop was. I just wanted to get off the bus and I wanted to be at home. This guy terrified me, and I work in security. I don't know why he terrified me, because I've dealt with people that are on drugs. I've dealt with people that are bigger and stronger than me. This guy was so creepy that he just terrified the life out of me. The bus rolled through the last few stops, and the students got off, that man got off, and the woman near the front, she left too. And soon it was just me and the driver. I was standing near the top of the bus, and the driver decided to chat to me through the glass. He said, "That was so weird, the guy at the stop. Where did he go?" And I just said, "I don't know, mate." Eventually my stop came and I got off, said a quick goodbye, didn't run, didn't look back, just walked that short distance that I needed to walk to get in the front door. And the relief when I finally got inside my house and closed the door and locked it behind me, it was one of the weirdest experiences I've ever had. I think the fact that the bus driver had saw this guy too, if he hadn't, I would probably have just put all this down to have been inside my head. But I really don't know.
No one knows your business better than you. So who better to create your website than, well, you? Wix's website builder puts it all in your hands. Create a beautiful website just by talking with AI, or choosing from thousands of templates. Customize every detail with simple drag and drop tools and get everything you need to start running business your way. Build more, think bigger, and do it all yourself on Wix. Go to
Now, let's get into our second paranormal encounter. My experience happened when I just turned 40. I had a relatively healthy, active lifestyle. I ate right, I worked out 5 times a week, and I had a busy schedule at work as a very busy hairstylist. Looking back in hindsight, I already started to get subtle symptoms of an illness onset, but at this time I didn't know what it was. Prior to turning 40, in the past 5 years, I would get subtle symptoms like a flash fever that would last moments and then it would go away. I'd get chronic kind of low-grade headaches, and I'd feel super fatigued. I would also have these short bouts of feeling really dizzy, and all of these things occurred randomly, so I just chalked it up to a lack of sleep, being super busy at work. And then it started to affect my vision, and I started to get these weird auras. I didn't think that there was anything seriously wrong with me. It was early September 2010, and I remember this day like it happened yesterday. I got up from bed, but was just so winded that I had to sit on the edge of the bed to catch my breath. I just remember feeling really dizzy at the same time. I finally got my energy up and I got ready for work. I made my lunch and headed off to the cars my partner was driving me to work that morning. As we were driving, I passed out a few times. My partner knew something was wrong, so they drove me to the local hospital. When we arrived at the hospital emergency room, I was admitted immediately, and they checked my heart rate. It was off the charts. I was so dizzy at this point and absolutely wrecked. I didn't realise I had this grey, pallor complexion apparently, and I was brought in immediately and they placed me in an examination room, and I was to wait there for a doctor. So I waited and waited. Then a doctor came in to examine me. I still remember this doctor that came in. He was of African descent. He was about 5'9", mid-40s, and wore these rather large, shiny, gold-rimmed spectacles. They reminded me of something from the 1970s, and I thought to myself how unusual it was for somebody to be wearing something of this type of style. Were they in fashion again? I didn't know. They were just so shiny gold. They were nearly sparkling. It was weird. I remember he examined me, and to my shock, his hands were ice cold. He went through all of my medical rounds and said to me not to worry, that everything will be okay. Then he left the room, never to return. I was then admitted to the hospital, where I stayed for almost 2 months before being diagnosed with a rare form of B-cell lymphoma. Only 2% of diagnosed cases survived this type of cancer, and I was now in stage 4. After going through rounds of chemo, and this was late December now, after Christmas, I found out that the chemo wasn't working, and I started getting tumours in my abdomen. The oncologist decided to ramp up chemo, and the dosage would be much higher and more aggressive. So aggressive with the first treatment, I lost all feeling in my legs and hands and arms, and I could no longer walk without the assistance of somebody else. I was told that I would never be able to do my job again, and that I would most likely be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life if I was to survive this. I was also told that if this more aggressive chemo didn't work, I would most likely have about a month to live. I had to accept this as my fate. I mean, what can you do when a doctor tells you this? I do believe in miracles. Within about a week, the tumours in my abdomen went away. So I continued with this second series of aggressive chemotherapy. By the end of the chemotherapy at the hospital, I found out I was fast-tracked to get a bone marrow transplant at another hospital. So eventually the time came for me to transfer to the new hospital, where they had an extensive bone marrow transplant centre. Prior to being transferred, I spoke with the head nurse of the floor, as I wanted to give thanks for those that had really taken care of me all that time. I asked the nurse if I could speak to the African doctor that I saw in the emergency department that first night. I remember her face. She looked at me with this puzzled look on her face. She knew practically everybody in the ER, and she eventually told me that there was no such person that worked in that ER. I don't know who that doctor was, whether it was an angel or a ghost, but whatever visited me was in physical form. He touched my wrist, checked my pulse. It was so shocking and kind of amazing. My treatment was a success. I managed to beat stage 4 rare lymphoma, and I'm now in full remission. Looking back, the apparition that showed itself to me said I would be okay and not to worry. And funnily, I never thought that I was going to die from this illness. Despite the harshness of the treatment and the side effects, I always knew from that moment when I met that doctor, it was going to be the hardest thing I'd have to go through, but I knew I would not die. I beat stage 4 rare form lymphoma, and I'm now in full remission, and I do not use a wheelchair. My hands and legs are usable, and I've even gone back to work. Thank you to George and Gerald for sending in their stories this week. I always love hearing about stories with people in hospitals or settings like that, and experiencing something paranormal, because there's a real comfort in the fact that there is these maybe angels or spirits that are there to comfort people in a time when they really need it. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode, and don't forget to hit that follow button if you haven't done already, so you don't miss a future episode. All the links for everything you need are in the episode show notes. You can join our Facebook supergroup. You can join our Instagram page. And And there's also a scary website, which is very, what we call in Ireland, bog standard, which means basic. And it is scaryaparanormalpodcast.com. Other than that, join me next week for another episode of Scary.
Say what you want about AI, but it's here. And it's helping businesses get more done in a day. Wix's website builder is infused with AI so you can stay ahead. Create a beautiful, functional website just by describing your idea. Track how your site appears in AI search results. Create custom images on demand, or launch an entire campaign in a matter of minutes. Wix gives you AI wherever you need it. Try it out for yourself at Wix.com.